Gentleman yields. Ms. Stefanik.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Gabbard, when you began your testimony, you stated that your remarks do not represent your personal beliefs. That's the first time I've heard that at a committee hearing. Why did you say that? Or is there anything in the threat assessment that you personally disagree with?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. The reason I've said that is twofold. Number one is when I assumed this role as Director of National Intelligence through the confirmation process and beyond, many members of Congress rightly said your personal views and your politics in this role get checked at the door. And as Director of National Intelligence, my responsibility is to report the intelligence community's assessments objectively and to make sure that they are not politicized in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately, there are those who, for one reason or another, have tried to mischaracterize the intelligence community's assessments and saying, well, this is just a political view, or trying to misdirect from what the intelligence community is reporting. So I took the opportunity to state that from the outset, that this is the intelligence community's assessments.
Thank you. I also wanted to ask this because this week there was a high-profile resignation of Director of National Counterterrorism Center. Now, I want to be clear from the outset. I've communicated directly with President Trump my support for Operation Epic Fury, and I was very not only disappointed, but how inappropriate this letter was. And I want to read a statement that and get your personal assessment, whether you agree or disagree with that. And that's this. Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed no imminent threat to the United States and that you should strike now. There was a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into a disastrous Iraq war. Now, I cannot say how much I disagree with that statement. Do you agree or disagree with what this letter was put out by former Director Kent?
He said a lot of things in that letter. Ultimately, we have provided the president with the intelligence assessments, and the president is elected by the American people and makes his own decisions based on the information that's available to him.
But do you agree with, does that statement he made, blaming Israel, concern you?
Yes.
My next question is, I want to touch on the rise of terrorist attacks on the homeland. In the month of March alone, there were multiple high-profile Islamic terrorist attacks. You had Temple Israel Synagogue in Michigan. You had in Texas, you had an ISIS-inspired attack where they threw an IED in New York City. What is your assessment as to the rise of Islamic terrorism on the homeland?
As you've pointed to, Congresswoman, this continues to be an extreme concern, not only because of the rise of these attacks, but the mechanisms which they're carried out and the challenges that the intelligence community has in being able to try to detect some of these threats and attacks in advance. I'd like to defer to the FBI director on some of this because they have been very successful in many cases over the last year in detecting them and preventing these attacks. But due to the nature of the challenge in many of these attackers not having contact with known foreign terrorist entities or individuals makes this a much more challenging threat to deal with.
And I want to turn to Director Patel. I think that's a good, important segue to get your assessment. And I also want to add another aspect of the question. We're working on a 9/11 Commission review, 25-year review. What other tools do you need to make sure that we are able to have the most robust, effective CT efforts?
Yeah. Thank you, Congresswoman. Just real quick, so last year we had 2,300 arrests related to foreign terrorist organizations. We had 700 counterterrorism arrests, and the FBI had 640 counterterrorism disruptions where we stopped attacks on the homeland. Specifically in December, we stopped 4 in an 18-day span. What I need is specifically highlighted in the Norfolk attack. In Norfolk, an individual who was convicted of terrorism and sentenced based upon that conviction should have still been in prison. The Department of Justice in the first Trump administration sought a sentence of 240 months. The judge in that case downward departed and gave a variance to nearly half that sentence. If that had not occurred, that individual would still be in prison and a member of our uniformed military service would still be alive. I want to work with the legislature to figure out how to increase the sentencing for convicted terrorists and also work on the denaturalization process for someone who should not be in this country who wants to attack and kill American citizens and American service members.
Thank you. Yield back.